As the GPT models, however, have gotten better, and also as my own intelligence and skills with coding also got a little bit better. Previously started a website, osteosynthesis.org. I'm not sure if you've seen that one. It's kind of just like a database of orthopedic radiology. That doesn't exist in Germany. Everyone's very reluctant to criticize. Everyone's very reluctant to admit mistakes. Everyone's very reluctant to go into a case analysis and that I really missed that.
Welcome back to Brew with Bones, a podcast where we explore ideas, innovations, and individuals shaping the future of orthopedics. Today, in a special one, we are joined by Dr. Edward Oates, an orthopedic trauma surgeon with specialization in reconstructive surgeries. He also has a deep interest in using digital technology and artificial intelligence to support surgeons with real-world clinical problems. Beyond trauma surgery, Dr. Oates has developed some platforms like the literature.com and the Operative Ink, both designed to simplify how surgeons access knowledge and visualize procedures. In this session, we shall explore the clinical journey, the problems that inspire these platforms, and the technology working behind the screens to make them possible. Dr. Oates, it's a pleasure to have you on Brew with Bones.
Thank you so much, Oates, for joining us, and we'd like to hear it from you.
Yeah, no, look, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm not gonna lie and say that all of these great technological things that I came up with were out of moments of brilliance and everything was planned. This is all things that have just evolved over time. Most of them just after work, sitting on the sofa with a laptop and just having a play. And I think the most poignant phrase is when you're playing around with something and you have this eureka moment and you realize that something works and you go, wow, I didn't really expect that to work, but now it does. What can I actually do with this? This is actually something pretty cool. So if we time travel back to, I don't know, what was that, end of 2022, beginning of 2023, I think was when ChatGPT really started to come onto the market. It made it out of the lab, it made it out of the university, and became a thing that you could access online. And I think we started off with GPT-3 or 3.5 or something. And I just found it fascinating, sitting on the computer at home and just playing with this stuff, going, wow, this is really cool. I think everyone got caught up in the wow, isn't this cool moment when it first came out. I think about 50% of people then fell off the wagon when we realized that half of the output from GPT were hallucinations and rubbish. But nonetheless, I stumbled onto something in one of these eureka moments where I realized all of these large language models, if we just consider a large language model as a probability or a statistical calculator, and the idea behind a large language model is it looks at the data set of information that it was fed, and it projects a statistical probability of what an answer or what a continuation of that statistical data set would look like. And so it doesn't actually know anything, but it can identify patterns and then can extrapolate out of that, and using a probability and using a vector analysis can then give you a predictive answer. And obviously the more training they get and the better the refinement, what we've seen over the last couple of years, they can do that with incredible good precision. But nonetheless, they don't actually they don't know anything. It's not like they have a data bank that they look up and then retrieve facts and present you with facts that they looked up in a book, or they haven't learnt things from a training material. They've just simply learnt probabilistic associations. So when I started playing with these, and you start looking at these hallucinations and stuff, you go, look, the one thing that these models can do really well is what I call wordsmithing. They can package language really well. They can manipulate language. They can produce really poetic literary answers. Could be absolute crap what's in there, like the actual content could be absolute rubbish, but linguistic capabilities in terms of language creation are there. And what it was lacking was reliable content. So I had this idea, this is this eureka moment. I thought, what if we fed a large language model a reliable data source and got it to use that reliable data source, wordsmith an answer, and present that as its answer. And that was kind of the very beginning of the literature.com. And that was where I didn't even have an API for PubMed at that time. I was using another proxy server to get some information, retrieve information from PubMed, and I would just feed some abstracts to ChatGPT. And then ChatGPT does a really good job of wordsmithing the abstracts into a readable document. And that way you could get around those hallucination problems, because you know it's not trying to make up its own information, rather it's retrieving information from PubMed, but it's packaging it in a nice, reliable, well, nice, readable, holistic piece of literature text which you can read. And basically that was the start of that. And this was this really, really rudimentary what's called a RAG system. It's called Retrieval Augmented Generation. And I don't even think RAG had an acronym at that time. That was kind of something that I did and other people were doing, and later became known as a RAG system. So this is this Retrieval Augmented Generation, where you don't rely on the large language model for its information. It retrieves and augments its generative answer with third-party information. And so that became a thing. So I guess I co-founded this thing in internet land, which then went on to development. And literally since then, every improvement in large language models has seen an improvement in the ability of the model to retrieve information and process it. I'm trying to think, one of the biggest things, one of the biggest improvements we've seen is originally we were very limited on what's called tokens, how much data you can give a model in a single instruction and what it can do with that. And even then, even if it said, hey, we can have 20,000 tokens, they had, basically it was a large language model attention deficit disorder. You'd give it 20,000 tokens and it would pay attention to the first paragraph and the last paragraph and just ignore everything in the middle. So that has improved massively. So not only do we have improved token volumes, I can dump 120,000 tokens into GPT these days, which is 6 times what it used to be and costs half as much. And it doesn't have this conscious black hole where it selectively ignores 2/3 of the content in the middle and actually seems to reliably go through the content. And I think that's part of what these reasoning models have also brought to the table with us. But yeah, long story short, the literature was just I wonder if it can do this kind of thing and do a retrieval augmented generative analysis, and progressed now to a point where we're running a 5.2 model is our main language handler in the background. And that's a little bit slow. I'll grant that. You plug in a question into the literature, it does chew up a bit of time until it spits out an answer, but it does an incredibly good job. And these as I said, the reasoning models do take a sort of a multi-step approach to answering questions. So they're not just a synthesis of paper A says this, paper B says that, paper C says this, and lists it off like a shopping list. It actually goes into a compare and contrast and says, these 3 studies present a cohesive argument, but that's against the results from this study and this study, and that could suggest X, Y, Z. So it actually does a quite remarkable job of reasoning with a bunch of literature. So status, what are we now? January 26. I'm running, like I said, 5.2. I don't think I'm not running any explicit token limits anymore. I used to cap them just to try and keep a lid on costs, but the costs have come down, so I don't cap them. We run, I think, a maximum of 30 or 40 retrievals from PubMed. So we don't smash it with hundreds of retrieved articles, but 30 or 40 articles. We do a staggered analysis, or rather a staggered retrieval within that subgroup, and then we do an analysis. And yeah, that's kind of how the literature started.
That's the idea behind the literature.com. Like, how does this idea get into action? So you got that idea, the eureka moment, when you're playing with this technology, and you saw some utility out of it. So how was it brought into action?
How do you actually do that? So there's two ways you can do this, and I'm like, first of all, I'm going to say I'm not a coder. I don't know my ass from my elbow in terms of coding, although that's not entirely true. I have learned an awful lot since starting all of this, but previously started a website, osteosynthesis.org. I'm not sure if you've seen that one. There's kind of just like a database of orthopedic radiology. And through that website, I'd learned a little bit, but I'd also made contact with a guy from Pakistan, actually. We had a good relationship in terms of he can do the coding. I give him all of my ideas, and he does the coding and brings this idea to life. As the GPT models, however, have gotten better, and also as my own intelligence and skills with coding also got a little bit better, more and more, we've got the ability to actually use GPT itself to do coding. And I think that's one of the things that probably GPT is fantastic at, because there's absolutely no thinking involved. This is 100% pattern recognition. Lines of code is simply, I think, a very basic probabilistic assembly line of characters. And the more advanced these models become, the better it can do all of this coding stuff. So, and now even, we'll get up to it later, but Gemini has got this thing called AI Studio, where they talk about vibe coding these days. You don't even need a guy in Pakistan to help you do this anymore. You can literally just jump into Google, into AI Studio, and AI Studio will generate entire directories full of code and subcode, and proofs it, runs it, and can even host it on Gemini. You're a little bit restricted to Gemini cloud services, but if you just overlook that for a second, anyone can literally take a vibe, an idea, and get some sort of functioning code out of it these days. But if we go back to way back then, I had my contacts from when I was doing osteosynthesis website, hit him up and said, look, I've got this idea. How do we implement this? And he did a very rudimentary implementation. In fact, it stayed incredibly rudimentary for up until just recently. I relaunched the website in October or November last year. And that's where it finally got mature. I think up until then it was not up to protocol. There was a lot of open API keys and a lot of security measures and stuff that weren't necessarily up to scratch, because we didn't have a clue, and he'd only done a very rudimentary job in doing his parts. And hey, it worked. It was good enough, and it sat as a beta idea for 2 years. Never really had an idea. What do you do with this thing? You know, it's a great resource, but what do you do with it? But no, that's a different question. But no, long story short, I had a contact. By the way, this is a free plug for Fiverr, fiverr.com. You get on fiverr.com, you can find anyone, anywhere, and they can code anything. It's fantastic. But between my Fiverr guy from Pakistan, between ChatGPT and me building up a little bit of my own knowledge, that was basically what got us online, so to speak. Very rough, bit rough around the edges, but it got online and it worked.
How did you balance your clinical practice and kept doing this even there was no obvious outcome for like 2-year period?
It's just, I've always, these things have never been something where I think, hey, I'm going to get rich off this, and this is going to take 100% of my attention and focus. And it's always just like, I've always said, it's like a tin can that are just kicking down the road. You know, just walk along, kick it along a little bit, pay the server fees. Yep, it's still online. Fiddle with it every couple of months or so, and I probably didn't give it the attention that it deserved for what it could do. But at the same time, like you say, like I'm a full-time trauma surgeon. I don't have time just where do you have the time to do all of this stuff? If I do it, it's on the sofa in the evening. I have a beer. My wife's watching TV, and I'll just hack away on the laptop for an hour or two. That's the kind of commitment that I had to this in the first couple of years. But I've tried to kick it up a gear a little bit. But yeah, it's not a full-time job. It's just a little side project.
Wonderful. The side project has given, I think, tremendous results now of late after you relaunched the literature.com. So
Yeah.
you kept in yourself alive the curiousness to try and find out what happens next. So
Yeah.
we'll be pleased if you can demonstrate the website. Right?
Yeah, sure. So well, I'll just touch on that. So the relaunch of the website was basically it sat in this constant beta mode for like 2 years, and it had security problems, and my API keys were open, and I'd constantly get my API key locked because there was some API security leak. And I thought, if I'm going to keep this going, I actually have to do it properly. And conveniently, at the same time, this AI Studio popped up. So AI Studio helped me rewrite it and actually get it halfway compliant. But no, I'll show you what it looks like and what it does now. How do I go share screen here?
So the final version that you have is actually wipe coded by you without any help.
Yeah, this one's all done by me / Gemini AI giving me a bit of a hand in the background. But actually, to be fair, this is a really simple script. There's no big smoke and mirrors involved in how this works at all. Basically, we can go through it, but basically, what it does, it will take the text that you put in as a question. It does an initial screen of that text, because there's one thing I've learned very, very early. People are terrible at asking questions. And one of the first feedbacks I got was, oh, the answers are really crap. And then I went back and had a look at their questions, and I went, no, the answers aren't crap. Your question's crap. And garbage in, garbage out. So I decided very early on to put some hints into the generation of questions in the very first instance, that would then help people to actually ask a decent question. So anyway, we'll show you. Give me a question. What do we want to look up? What is the clinical outcome of cannulated screws versus hemiarthroplasty in neck of femur fractures? And so that's my basic question, and then it'll come up with a bunch of slightly modified versions. What are the clinical outcomes of cannulated screws compared to hemiarthroplasty in patients with neck of femur fractures? Slightly better. Like, I don't think my question was terrible to start off with, so it can't be improved that much, but you get these hints, and this puts the question more into a PICO framework, which is your patient, your intervention, your comparator, and your outcome format. So let's and I was just saying, let's say just add geriatric. So we don't want geriatric. Can't spell geriatric. Yeah, and then you can go down here. Just ignore that. We have various profiles, and I've set the default at, and this is the basic that I think everyone who's medicine oriented or surgically oriented uses, but we can scroll it right down to just absolute first principles. This will use simplified language. I actually made this one for my dad, so my dad likes to use this website and looks up stuff. He's not medically minded, he's an engineer, don't blame him. But it takes it through fundamental steps, uses analogies with real world objects and scenarios that makes it simpler to understand. Just the Facts is a really condensed, relatively short, high content, fact-driven analysis. It doesn't really go into a lot of statistical analysis or really deep analysis. Statistics for the nerds who just want to pull the numbers out. So if you've got something that's very, very statistics driven, and you want to look at the incidence of the outcomes or the comparative incidence of stuff, you can just do a statistical analysis and it'll pull just the numbers. And then we get more into the reviews, and this is a plain language review, maybe for either non-English speaking background or for rudimentary baseline knowledge. Then we get up into more academic literature reviews, which uses sort of more advanced concepts and uses more comparative stuff. The advanced integrative review gets far deeper, really pushes the validity of the papers, looks at the mechanistic validity, whether or not this stuff actually makes sense. It does a little bit more tough job. Reviewer 2, I think Reviewer 2 is just harsh. I put that in as like a really harsh critic. It starts off with a pessimistic tone and takes all of the negative aspects of the papers and gives you a really overly critical, but sometimes that's useful, and say, look, are these any good or is this rubbish? And sometimes Reviewer 2 has to give it. No, actually these are pretty good. But if Reviewer 2 says it's good, you go, okay, mate, I'm paying attention. And up to guidelines. So basically, if I wanted to use the available literature to generate therapeutic guidelines, not that this is a clinical tool, by the way, this is in no way sense a medical device, and it's not allowed to be used in clinical environments. It's just an educational tool, but you can use that to give a guideline-esque analysis, where you go, okay, what should we actually be doing? What does the literature say is the smartest process to follow? So, as I said, the most common one I use is just an integrative analysis. Click on the I accept the terms and conditions and hit go. Now, this I said uses 5.2 as the background model, and 5.2 is a reasoning model. It means that it goes through multiple steps. It'll try and interpret the question better. It takes some time to actually establish what is the question that's being asked. It will then pre-pass all of the papers that have been retrieved from PubMed, and then it will then go back through that pre-passed concept and then assemble an actual sort of literature result. Now, this can typically take about 40 to 50 seconds. Sometimes if there's an absolute ton of papers, it'll take a little bit longer. It can take up to a minute and a half. I've often thought, instead of staring at suspenseful music icons for 40 seconds, I could probably get some advertising and put it here. There'd be like a really cool captured audience. I could probably put an advertising, but I don't know how to do any of that. So there we go. That was what, 40 seconds or so. So this has pulled up 15 articles. It doesn't always use, like it would have pulled up 30, but it's chosen 15 to actually do the analysis on. It doesn't use everything. And it starts off with a too long, didn't read analysis, basically an abstract. And you can see it's all cited. You've actually got all of the citations to a reference list at the bottom here. And it starts off with with a too long didn't read. So across heterogeneous elderly cohorts, cannulated screw fixation yields lower perioperative surgical insult and lower immediate in-hospital mortality, but higher rates of fixation failure and non-union osteonecrosis, which is basically what we knew. I didn't ask it a hard question. We know what the answer is going to be. But basically then goes into this, associated greater intraoperative blood loss, early in-hospital mortality, in some series, elevated 30-day readmission driven by medical complications. I think it's really cool. Like if I use this basically to fact check or idea check when I'm at work. I pull it up on my phone, I stick in a question, or I've had a rep in my ear telling me about, say, like, how good is the FNS? It's so biomechanically superior to 3 cannulated screws. I'm like, oh, really? Well, let me just check that. And I can check the literature on, what is the biomechanic stability or my biomechanic advantage of an FNS over cannulated screws. So that's what I find it useful for. Then goes into a deeper analysis, and there's lots of words. We don't have to read them all. that you see here. Then it looks at the mechanistic plausibility. Yeah, it actually thinks, what is it? What are the articles doing? Does it make sense? Talks about bias, translational relevance. It's just going to say, I think it's pretty amazing what this thing can do. And then summarizes in a discussion. What I've also included, and this is one of the things I did in the revamp, it also has like a little chatbot here. And this then takes all of the studies. It's not just the article that was written, but it takes all of the cohort of studies from PubMed that are sitting in the background still in the server cache. And you can ask it a question. So my mom is 87 and broke her hip. What should we do? Oh, look, I've actually trained it really well. So you're not allowed to ask, because it's not a medical device, you can't ask patient-oriented questions. So it's actually refused to answer the question. However, decision-making process, based on the literature, hemiarthroplasty generally offers advantages such as lower reoperation rate and better early functional recovery. So it's been told and is trained to not directly answer clinical questions, but you can obviously then push it. What is the, wait a minute, what is the difference in blood loss? So if you actually want, that's what surgeries. If you want actual number, combusting mushrooms more extensive surgery, difference consistent across multiple studies. Okay, do you have milliliter figures? No, it doesn't. So in the material that it has, doesn't actually go into absolute milliliters for a direct milliliter comparison, but can only talk about it. So intraoperative blood loss from Kodal and Purhol, and then you can go down here. You can find that article. Look, here it is here. Unfortunately, no full text. The ones that have full text available, you can hit full text, and it'll pull up the full text article. Otherwise, you can use this link, and this will then open PubMed. I can't actually share multiple screens, but that then opens a PubMed window with all of those articles listed for you that you can then go through individually. It's a little bit like open evidence. Open evidence is obviously like they're now what, a $3 billion company or something. That was driven by the Mayo. They have then established. I'll turn this back off. The Mayo has got relationships with major publishers, so they have not only say what I've got. I just hit PubMed and I retrieve everything from PubMed directly. So whatever PubMed has, I can get. So it's basically extended abstracts. They will have access to full articles, and more importantly, they're driven at a consensus model where you're trying to establish what's the best quality evidence, what are the randomized controlled trials, what are the clinical recommendations, etc. And they'll have full access to those, and will then pull management strategies down for you. This is a little bit different. This will not deliberately look for the highest level of evidence. I won't look for that consensus. Rather, it pulls out the individual articles and then gives you the opportunity to think about it yourself. So on the main page, it's an instrument for thinking. We're not talking about something that is trying to give you an answer. We're not looking for consensus. We're not looking for a bedside quick answer which I can implement, which will get me out of a clinical problem right now and give me that answer. Rather, looking for that clinician or for that academic or for the person who just has that question. You got that question on the tip of your tongue, and I want to know something about this now. And I can't be bothered doing a proper PubMed search on it. PubMed sucks to navigate on the best of days, but you want that little bit more information. You want to be smarter. You want that information on the fly so you can be informed whilst you're going forward. So that's the literature.
Okay. So that's like an on-the-go reference platform for all your queries, something like that.
Basically, I use it at conferences, sitting in conferences and listening to people carry on about stuff, and fact check them, and I don't know. Or if I just have a clinical question, or talking to my wife. My wife's a gynecologist, and she'll ask me something about general medicine, and I'm like, oh God, I've got no idea. I'll ask. I'll see what the literature says, and it just gives you this digestible. It's easy to read, digestible. It's well balanced stuff to think about. It doesn't give you consensus. It doesn't give you the what you do next answer, but it gives you that stuff to chew on. It gives you the information to chew on.
Wonderful, Dr. Oates. So it's amazing how you leverage the existing Google AI Studio and came up with such a wonderful idea. Now you just taken out the part of writing narrative reviews from from the authors. I guess this is giving a wonderful summary with the evidence and reference links. It's a tremendous job to come out with such a platform.
Yeah, it's and the one thing I think is worth mentioning about this as well is I've kept this free. It does have API costs and server costs and stuff in the background, but I decided early on I wanted to keep this free. And what is really cool is I've got the ability to see where the traffic comes from. You can just look at the country of origin, a lot of this stuff. And last year, both actually 2024 and 2025, I actually looked at the statistics recently because I thought it might come up here. Both years, I think 2024 served 164 countries, and last year 163 countries. I think there's only like 180, 190 countries in the world. To think that this small, insignificant thing, the idea I had on my sofa some random evening, has helped someone in some country, one of 163 countries somewhere in the world, someone has gotten a little bit smarter, or it's answered a question, or it's helped them with a problem. That's worth it. And so that's my benevolent, my gift to the world kind of thing. I don't want to put a price on that. I don't want to charge for that. Putting a paywall on that would kill access to all these people in low and middle income countries that would otherwise access this. There's nothing better than when I see that someone from like Burkina Faso or Tanzania has accessed this, and you're just like, wow, I'd love to know who this person is. I'd love to know where they are and what are they doing right now, and what are they accessing. So that will stay free. I'm going to keep it running. Hopefully it doesn't get too popular, otherwise I might have to reconsider that. But at the rate it's running, it's pretty cool. It's a sustainable thing, and it gives me a warm fuzzy feeling to know that people use it. So
wonderful. That's very altruistic of you to do that. So what is the next version going to be like? How are you thinking that the literature.com will evolve over a period of time?
Well, it all depends what the technology allows. Like, as I said, this is it's a relatively simple script that generates this. There's no massive infrastructure behind it. What I don't know if you've seen, I haven't actually got the examples here. Have either of you seen this 3D galaxy network that I made a month or two ago? It spits out this 3-dimensional galaxy of interlinked papers. It takes the PubMed results, it pulls out all of the citations, all the backwards and forward citations from articles, and then does a cross-link analysis of which articles are quoted or cited by who, and where are the clusters of most cited articles. And you can see this in a three-dimensional map. And from there, you can then click through and discover new associations or discover relationships between things. You think, oh, look, posterior tibial slope and ACL. We know now, well, we've established that, posterior tibial slope and ACL re-injury rates are associated. But imagine we didn't know that, and you've actually got a thing here with posterior tibial slope, and you've got another node over here, the glowing white with ACL, and you see a couple of links between them, and you can start putting ideas together that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise come up with because you don't naturally come across those associations. And seeing that in this 3D networked map, you can suddenly start seeing stuff. So that runs horrifically slowly on my computer, and trying to click on nodes and use this visual interface to then create a concept map is cumbersome. Either my computer's not fast enough, or the actual processing requirements of this massive network idea is just too big. But that would be something, I think, at least in my head, would be the next step, where I go, okay, not just put in a question, get an answer, but I think that will always have a particular role, because you just want this simple hit a website, put in the question, get an answer. That's what most people want. Most people don't want to go down the rabbit hole and get complicated. But for those who do, it offers the ability to really go down a new and unique rabbit hole that I don't think I've never had. We go to the library when I was at med school, and I wouldn't have anything like this. Now you've got like this network map, and you can actually then get into a topic and see this associative, concepts. That's pretty cool. That's probably the next thing I play with, because I've done the groundwork, or at least I had that ground idea, and probably use that as a springboard at some point and take it along. But like I said, that killed my computer last time I tried to play with it. So I'll either need a new laptop, or we'll see.
Wonderful. I actually saw that network mapping on your LinkedIn post sometime back. I was just about to ask if it is a different platform, or it's kind of a scientometric analysis, right? Linking the papers and showing it in a 3-dimensional map.
There are like sites like Connected Papers, which just spit out a similar kind of map, where they just do this co-citation network analysis and just brings down how this idea just propped up in timeline, and then they just align this and give some ideas out of it. And it's just an extension of that. Something like that.
Something like that. I'm still only based in PubMed though, and so PubMed doesn't have any H indexes. It doesn't give you any. It doesn't give you any author indexes. Doesn't give you any publication indexes. So it's really difficult. And these other platforms, actually run by people with money, have access to other databases where they can then retrieve stuff. So you can actually pull out high power articles based on publication, based on author. Index, etc. So I'm always a little bit behind. I'm a little bit, I don't know, a little bit jealous, I guess, of these big companies who've got teams of people and lots of money to spend on this. But for what this is, I think it's pretty cool.